Welcome back. Thank you again for joining us for the Joyful Noise and Music Academy with John Castile. In this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the circle of fifths, and we're going to further discuss the pattern of how the diatonic scale is created so that we can establish the notes using a pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. That is a fixed configuration of notes that allows us to discover what the notes are supposed to be for the diatonic scale for every key that we'll ever play in. So let's look at how this is structured. So we looked at in the last lesson, when you go from C to D in the key of C, you're going two half steps or two semitones. So you're going from C to C sharp, which is one half step or one semitone, and then from C sharp to D, which is another semitone or half step. So from C to D, we consider that to be a whole step. Same story when we go from D to E. We're going two semitones or two half steps, therefore it's considered a whole step. Now from E to F, even though we're going for a full letter in the alphabet, it's still only a half step away from each other because there's no black note in between those two notes. So it's considered a half step. So that's kind of the magic formula for figuring out what note 4 is, or chord 4, in the 1-4-5 chord progression, is the whole step, and then half step. That becomes note 4, which begins chord 4 in the chord progression of the 1-4-5 sequence that we've been talking about. All right, going on from F to G, that's a whole step. Then from G to A, we'll notice that's a whole step. And then A to B is a whole step as well. So that's a pattern that will be present in every single key in every single situation that you're going to run into with music. All right, let's look at a different key. Let's look at the key of G. So we know from G to A, if we look at the half steps or the semitones involved, then that means from G to A is a whole step. So from going to A to B is another whole step. From B to C, there's that half step, which means C is note 4 of the diatonic scale, which is the beginning of chord 4. Okay, from C to D, that's a whole step. From E to F is a whole step. Now, what about the next note? If we go a whole step from E, what is our note going to be? From E to F is a half step, and from F to F sharp is a half step. Therefore, a whole step is going to be F sharp. That means we have one sharp note in the key of G. And that's how we establish what that note is going to be, by following this pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. Now let's go try another key. Let's look at the key of D and discover what the sharp notes are in the key of D. So in the key of D, we start with D, go from D to E, that's going to be a whole step. Okay, two semitones or two half steps equals a whole step. Now, what's a whole step up from E? We have to go two semitones to make it a whole step. So we're going to go to F sharp in this case, is the next whole step in the pattern. Then we're going to go a half step. So what's a half step from F sharp? That's simply going to G. So that tells you what the 4 note is. Again, what begins the 4 chord in the D, the key of D. So D is chord 1, G is chord 4 because it falls on that half step sequence in the pattern. Now, if we go a whole step from G, our note's going to be A, another whole step. That will make our note B, and then another whole step. What's the note going to be? Is going to be C sharp. So the key of D has 2 sharps in it, whereas the key of G only had 1 sharp in it. Now, what we're going to look at is what we call the circle of fifths. Now, I want to explain this so that you understand the structure. I've done this in this order for a reason. From C to G is a total of 5 notes. So C, D, E, F, and G. Okay, so there's 5 letter positions between there. In reality, they are 7 semitones away from each other. So if we go from C to C sharp, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 7 semitones, or what we call 5 notes away. That's why it's called the circle of fifths, is because it's every 5th note in the note pattern. Okay, so from C to G, there's 5 notes. And then from G to D, there's 5 notes. Again, that's why it's called the circle of fifths. But I want you to notice that they are technically 7 semitones away from each other. Even though there's 5 notes, there's 7 semitones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's super important when we get into the more difficult parts of the circle of fifths. Okay, so notice this. When we start in the key of C, we have 0 sharps and flats, no black notes, right? When we go to the next 5th note away, okay, we have 1 sharp and flat note that we discovered a moment ago. We go another 5 notes away, we're going to have 2 sharps and flats. So what would the next note be from D? Let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's going to be the key of A. Is going to be the next 5th away from D. All right. How many sharps and flats do you think it's going to have? Yep, it's going to have 3 sharps in that particular key. So there's a pattern emerging here, as you'll notice. So what's the next one? If we go up another 5th, as it's called, we're going to go to the key of E. And yes, it's going to have 4 sharps in it. So from E to the next 5th is going to be B. From there, we're going to go to F sharp. Because if we count the semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 7 semitones away. We're going from the key of B to the key of F sharp, and then we go another 7 semitones away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be the key of C sharp, and yes, it would have 7 sharps in the key of key sharp. It goes up by 1 every time. So C has 0 sharps. G, which is a 5th away from C, has 1 sharp. Another 5th away from that is D, which has 2 sharps. Another 5th is A, which has 3 sharps. E would have 4 sharps. B would have 5 sharps. F sharp would have 6 sharps. And C sharp would have 7 sharps in its key. That's what we call the circle of fifths. This is what a common diagram looks like for the circle of fifths. And you'll notice it rotates clockwise, in this case going to the sharps. From C, a 5th away from C, which is 7 semitones or 5 notes away, has 1 sharp in it. G to D, which is again 5 notes away or 7 semitones, has 2 sharps in it. From D to A, it's got 3 sharps. A, another 5th away from that's the E, has got the 4 sharps. B has got the 5 sharps. F sharp down here has got the 6 sharps. And then C sharp over here, and its little diagram is down here, tells us you have 7 sharps in the C sharp. And then the flats simply go the opposite direction. From C, if you go backwards to the left 5 notes, you get to the key of F. And it's going to have 1 flat. Another 5 notes away, or 7 semitones, if you count them, you're going to end up on B flat, and it's going to have 2 flats. Then another 7 semitones away is going to be E flat, which will have 3 flats. A flat will have 4 flats. D flat will have 5 flats. G flat will have 6 flats, and then C flat will have the 7 flats. And that's how the circle of fifths works. It's just counting 7 semitones away from each other, or 5 notes are considered a 5th away from each other. So that's simply how the circle of fifths is structured. I know that's a lot. We'll dig into it a little deeper in the next video, so we'll see you then.